So this evening, Devi Ji and I want to speak, obviously, on the topic of being a channel for peace and harmony. It's an extremely important topic at this point in time. We have a very good friend and a very, very fine astrologer who's a member of Ananda community, named Drupada. Many of you may know him, and many of you may even have had astrological readings from him. Among other things, people write him to look ahead for them, to pick an auspicious date for a marriage or some other event in their lives. And looking ahead for this coming year, he found that there was a pattern that he alerted us to. And I'm not going to talk in depth about the astrological aspect. I just want to use this as a kind of a motivation for all of us to do what we're talking about tonight, being a channel for peace and harmony in the world. But what he found in looking ahead is that starting later this month, in February, Mars and Saturn are going to come together, and they're going to be in the house of Scorpio, which makes three very intense energies. Now, normally this would pass relatively quickly, but this year, this conjunction is going to be there from the end of February to into September. And what happens during this time is that the intensity of Saturn, which is one of the planets that gives lessons to its influences to discipline and give us our lessons, that combined with Mars, which has the energy of conflict, is going to intensify what we're already seeing around us. You don't have to be a genius to look around and see that the world is filled with conflict right now and polarization. All over the world, we're seeing intensification of the polarization of different attitudes, of different ideas, of different paradigms. And those different ideas are not attempting to get along with each other. There's no compromise anymore. I just saw a quote by the American President Obama saying that without compromise, there can be no government. Well, he was talking about the politics in America, but he might as well have been talking about the mindset of the world. At this point, there is enough fanaticism, and fanatics do not want to and will not compromise, and therefore the planet cannot be governed harmoniously. And with this astrological period that we're going through, it's going to, according to Drupada, intensify. Now, I don't say this in order to frighten us. I don't say this even in order to motivate us, because whether we're going through a temporary period like this that is going to intensify and then pass, or whether we didn't go through that period, still every one of us has within us the potential to become beacons of light and beacons of peace and harmony in the world. Or we have also the possibility of being little black holes of bad attitudes and attacking others. And that choice is up to us. It's always up to us. But the choice for us who are pursuing the spiritual path, and those of us, I look around the room, I see many, many friends here that we've known for a long time. We're 10 or 15, 20 years. I look around some of the Americans we've known all of our adult life. And those of us who have spent a significant amount of time and given our consciousness to God, our service to God, Yogananda said that we actually, as we grow, as our consciousness grows, so does our responsibility. He used that word, responsibility, to become channels of light and channels of peace. So it's not only that it would be nice, it is actually that we have a spiritual responsibility to be channels of peace and harmony for the world. Let me ask this question, very simple question, looking around the room. If we who sit in this room do not become peacemakers for this planet, who in the world will be? We're among those best placed in order to put out the vibration of peace and harmony. Now, I'll talk a little bit about each of these, but let me just mention from the choir, they sang a perfect song for this discussion tonight. It comes from the prayer of St. Francis, and the prayer, it's extremely well known all around the world. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is sorrow, let me sow joy, and so on. Interestingly enough, there was an article, those of us who are disciples of Yogananda love this. There was an article that came out of the Vatican a few years ago in their magazine, and someone had done research to find the origin of that wonderful worldwide prayer, world-known prayer of St. Francis. They wanted to find where it emanated from. And the first reference came from the breviary, or the little kind of spiritual notes of William the Conqueror, who was Master Yoganandaji, Paramahansa Yoganandaji, in a former lifetime. And so this consciousness of harmony, this consciousness of peace, is one that emanates from the divine. You know, harmony, we saw that in play as the singers sang the song that they presented for us. Harmony in music is that each voice singing a note, a different note, if those notes vibrate harmoniously together, we hear a beautiful kind of combination. And if they don't, we hear what's called a dissonance or disharmony, and we want to close our ears like that because it sounds unpleasant. But see, harmony comes because of vibration. And the spiritual vibration that we have as we meditate more deeply, as we serve God, as we do any of our spiritual practices, that raises our consciousness. And another way of describing raising of consciousness is that it changes our vibration. It changes the vibration. Actually, Lahiri Mahashaya talked about how different states of consciousness have faster or slower vibrations. And different areas in the body have faster or slower vibrations. The point between the eyebrows has the most calm vibration, the stillest vibration. And that's why we concentrate there, in part. There are other reasons also. But here we're talking about vibration. By concentrating here, we attune our individual ego-driven consciousness to the vibration of stillness, which is the vibration of God. And so when we raise our consciousness, when we raise our vibration, many things happen, among which is automatically there comes peace and harmony. When our mind is calm and uplifted, and our heart is open, we have the desire to see everyone in the world be calm and uplifted and happy and peaceful. And not only do we want to see it, we're willing to sacrifice even our own lives in order to bring that about. We have a little room to the side here that is the offices, among other things, of the Paramahansa Yogananda Charitable Trust. And in there, because of the beautiful example set by Mother Teresa, there's a nice picture there, and a quote, a nice picture of Mother Teresa, and a quote that says, "Peace begins with a smile." Now that is one of those kinds of things that you see on a poster, and it barely registers in the mind, and if it does register, you say, oh, that's a sweet little sentiment. But in fact, it is much more than just a sweet little sentiment. Peace begins, where does a smile come from? A smile comes from joy, or it comes from uplifted consciousness. You never see someone smiling and saying, I feel so awful. I hate the world. I hate you. You see, the consciousness that literally, and Swami talked about this often, that our bodies express our consciousness. You can't say, stand like this and say, I feel so happy. I feel so energetic. I love the world. Nor can you stand like this and say, I'm miserable. But Master said, I found this fascinating. He said that if you're in a bad mood and you cannot get yourself to smile, he said, push the corners of your mouth off and force yourself to smile. Because there's a physiological aspect. When our energy is rising, when it's going to higher consciousness, our body becomes more upright. Our mouth turns upright. Our eyes turn upright. All the energy rises. And so that rising energy automatically produces peace and harmony. It produces also love. It produces joy. It produces calmness. It produces all of the aspects of God. And we don't have to strive. We don't have to think, oh, I'm feeling uplifted, therefore, what is it I'm supposed to do? Oh yes, I'm supposed to love people. We don't need to think about it. It's an automatic response for us. So the peace and harmony that comes from the upliftment of consciousness is there automatically for us. So I just want to end by talking a little bit about each of these, peace and harmony. We heard one of our friends in Pune told us a joke. He said, I want to die peacefully. A young man says, I want to die peacefully in my sleep, like my grandfather did. Not screaming in terror, like the passengers of the car he was driving. I don't know where I go from that, back to the theme of peace and harmony. But we do want peace in our life, and we want to extend that peace so that it reaches out to other people. And if we do that with depth of consciousness and depth of concentration and a strong will behind it, we can, in fact, create the vibration of peace and harmony in the world. Most especially, if we do it, we will create the vibration of peace and harmony amongst those that we touch individually and connect with personally. You know, they've found that if a person is in a group of people that smoke, if one person stops smoking, all of their friends are more likely to stop smoking too. And so you can say, well, I understand, that's kind of natural, they set a good example. But the next circle of friends out that first person never meets, they're also less likely to smoke, more likely to stop smoking, and even a third ring out is less likely to smoke. The influence grows less and less as it extends outward. But any good act that we do, any light that we bring into the world, any peace and harmony that we become a channel affects those around us. Now, is this effect strong? It is so strong that it forms the foundation of why we formed the Ananda communities. Yoganandaji said that if a person is seeking God, to gather together with others who are seeking God, to live together especially, but also to gather together in groups like this, to have satsang together, the gathering of truth, to have satsang, increases in each of us the influence that we're trying to produce in ourselves and produce in the world. And so that energy that we put out as a group can have a very, very powerful effect. And so this year, because of this prediction of difficult times, as an Ananda worldwide work, we are putting out daily prayers for peace and harmony. Devi ji is going to talk about that, so I won't mention it more. But those prayers of peace and harmony, if done with concentration, done by a group, can have a powerful effect on the world. They've found even that a group of people who are all meditators can affect the weather. It can make the weather more harmonious. See, all of the world works on consciousness. All of the world works on vibration. And so when we bring our vibration into the vibration of peace and harmony, we affect those around us most powerfully, a next circle a little less powerfully, but we will in fact affect the whole world with our vibration. And so we have not only the opportunity, but I would say the responsibility to put out these vibrations of light and love and joy, and most especially at this time of peace and harmony into the world.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It's such a joy. We just arrived in India yesterday, and it's such a, after a little mix-up, I must admit, Diana and Jyotish and I had our schedules, and we were expected that we were going to get here on Thursday, and we had a day to rest, but somehow we read the schedules wrong. And at the very last minute, we all realized, no, we weren't coming in on Thursday, we were coming in on Friday. And so we, luckily, we caught it soon enough that we were all picked up at the airport. But it's really a joy to be here in India and to be with all of you. And so many of you we've had the good fortune of spending time with in different venues, different gatherings, and it's just I can't, with all sincerity, it's such a joy to be back and to see all of you. India, it's unlike any other place in the world, and we've been to many places in the world. And we go back to the West, to America, and we have a nice life there in the Ananda community. Beautiful, beautiful. But even in the midst of the natural beauty and serenity and quiet, some part of us longs to come back to India. And you may say, well, why? What is it? Maybe you're like a fish swimming in water and you don't see the water, but there's just a quality underlying the consciousness in India of peace, of unitive thinking, of harmony, of understanding that the real purpose of life is not just to acquire material possessions, but the real purpose of life is to explore the inner realms where we find that peace and harmony within us. And so when we come back, because we are children of Paramahansa Yogananda, spiritual children, we feel like we've come home again. And we thank all of you for your dedication, your commitment to this beautiful path that Master and Swamiji have given us. As Jyotish was saying, we have gotten some interesting astrological predictions for the coming year, but there's another way to look at all this as well. Sri Yukteswar, our power guru, our guru's guru, talked in his wonderful book, Holy Science, talked about the shifting of the ages. And even though traditionally Kali Yuga, the Dark Age, is supposed to continue for quite a long time, Sri Yukteswar, who is not only an avatar, but a great mathematician and astrologer, he said no improper calculations have come into the reckoning of the yugas, and we actually entered a new age, Dwapara Yuga, the age of energy, around 1900. And this is an age where the old forms of religion, social systems, national politics, all of these things, it's beginning to shift. And so, and also Swamiji has explained that at the shifting of an age, whatever it may be, I don't want to go into a discussion of the yugas, perhaps you're familiar with it already, but there are 4 ascending ages and descending, and it's this great cycle that goes on until the end of the age of Brahman, where God withdraws all this manifestation from outward creation back into the restful state without manifestation. But in this shifting from Kali Yuga to Dwapara Yuga, it's a particular time of transition, of change, of instability, of unrest. And we will see this particularly in the years ahead. Dwapara Yuga is not an age of serenity, of harmony and peace. It's an age of reforming, of old forms breaking down, new forms emerging. And so, as we were saying earlier, for all of us in the room here, for devotees of whatever path you might be following, for people of sincerity and goodwill throughout the world, we need to understand that we have a responsibility now, a moral and spiritual responsibility, because our thoughts are much more powerful than we imagine. We as human beings, as Paramahansa Yoganandaji taught us, are much more powerful than we imagine. We have the power to affect great change in this world, but most people are like flotsam and jetsam, little bits of wood and debris that just float along the current, whatever seems to be prevalent. If everyone's listening to a kind of music, everyone's wearing a certain style, everyone's voting in a certain way, most people just get carried along with that. But then there are people, and like all of us in this room, who are looking for deeper meaning within ourselves. What is real to me? What is purposeful to me? What rings true to me? What is true of who I am? And it is our karmic responsibility to listen and follow that inner guidance and to try to affect a change. Master said once one of his disciples was kind of resisting Master in some advice he had given him. And finally he said, "I'm sorry, I'm so stubborn, Master." And Yoganandaji said, "That's all right, I attract stubborn people." But it takes stubborn people. Let's phrase it in a different way. People of willpower, to be able to stand up against the prevalent currents of consciousness in the world, which are so easy to be pulled along by, and to say, "No, I will not go that way." I remember, I also am a stubborn person, and I remember when I was in college, many ages ago, I would, as a college student in America, you could earn a little extra money by being a subject for psychological experiments, and they weren't bad, but so one experiment that I participated in, they put you in a totally dark room where you had no visual sense, and there was one tiny little dot of light. That's all you could see, and you could hear a voice on a loudspeaker coming and say, "Tell us if the light is moving to the right or to the left." And that's all, and you're just in this room all by yourself with this point of light. And I kind of figured out if I held my thumb up to block the light, I could see if it was moving right or left. And I said, "The light isn't moving, it's standing still." And the voice from outer space said, "No, you have to tell us if it's moving right or left." And so we got in a big argument, and I just said, "It's not moving." And finally this voice said, "We will not let you out of this room until you tell us if it." And I said, "I don't care if you never let me out of the room, I'm not going to lie about it." And then finally they opened the door and they said, "You ruined the whole experiment." It wasn't moving, but we were saying if we could influence you, and they couldn't influence. So they said, "We're throwing out your data." And I said, "Okay, I don't care, but are you still going to pay me for doing it?" I said, "Yes, yes." But in a way, that's sort of what life is like. The world is telling you this is real, and you feel within you that it's right to hate people who have a different religion than you, who have from a different background, a different culture. It's right to protect your own interests before that of others. It's okay to take advantage of people and to cheat in life if it gets you ahead in life. And something inside of you is saying, "No, it's not okay to do that. I don't want to live that way." And yet, so many people just sacrifice that, the light of the divine spark within them that is our guide to true fulfillment, to true spiritual evolution. And we go along with the crowd, wherever, like little lemmings, even if they're running off a cliff, we just join the crowd. But for people like all of us who have been drawn to spiritual teachings, who are seeking something higher, it is so important to say, if I deny the truth that I feel within me, that the purpose of life is to serve others, the purpose of life is not to think of myself first, but to always see the benefits to others first, to live in a spirit of compromise, not in the sense of giving up, but a sense of coming together and creating a harmony with others. If we give that up, then we just, in a sense, our life becomes washed away as though it had no importance at all. And so we have a responsibility, not only to the society we're living in today, but honestly, more importantly, we have a responsibility to the God within each one of us. And the God within each one of us is saying, stand up now. The world needs voices that will represent a higher truth. It was Jyotish and I and Jayaji and Sadhana Devi, we came to Swami in the very beginning, 1968, 69, and he was most of you knew him as an elderly man, but when we first met him, he was still in his 40s. And he was a man of so much courage. No matter what the world dealt him, no matter what blows came on his shoulders, he had that beautiful, strong posture. His shoulders were squared off. His heart was open to the world. And really, from his dedication to his guru, as Dalji was saying earlier, he created a great world movement. He said the theme song of Ananda, the communities, is "Go On Alone." And he said that may seem like a paradox, but it's not. Because a community in God is formed of people who stand up, individuals who stand up for their own truth. And that is our bond. It isn't that we all think the same, we all act the same, say the same, none of that. It's we are all standing up for the truth within each one of us. And so this is our responsibility. If people can do this, it begins to make a tremendous impact on the world. There was actually a study that was done, kind of an experiment, that was done in America some years ago, where a group of disciples of the Transcendental Meditation School, Maharishi, a large number of them moved to the state of Rhode Island in America, which is the littlest state, very teeny. So a large number of people moving there could make a difference on the population. And they just all began meditating regularly according to their practice. They didn't proselytize, they didn't try to go out and draw people. They just lived the truth and the practices that they had been taught. And within not very long, people began noticing something was happening in Rhode Island. The weather patterns were becoming more harmonious, less polarized. And I don't know if you followed the weather globally, but really the story is a week ago in New York, it was in the 60s. Now it's below zero. This is Fahrenheit, not centigrade. But it's just this huge dichotomy. So in Rhode Island, the weather began improving. The incidence of violent crimes began going down. Terminal illnesses began declining. All of this because a concentrated group of people were meditating. And we need to understand that our thoughts, as I said before, are so powerful. There's a beautiful book, which you may have seen, called Messages from Water. And it's done by a Japanese researcher, and it's photographs from a high-powered microscope, molecular microscope, of water molecules. And it shows them in all different conditions. First, when they're just pristine, beautiful water. And the photographs are beautiful. They're like beautiful snowflakes and crystalline structures and just like beautiful gems. And then it shows the same water molecules that have been in a room with people thinking violent, negative thoughts. Immediately, those water molecules become horrible, distorted, almost like howling faces. The power of thought on water molecules. Well, those of us who have studied any bit about physiology know, what is the human body made of? It's mainly made of water. And so imagine what happens to us when we go to see a violent, horrible movie or listen to violent, negative music. It is changing us on a molecular level. But that's the bad news. The good news is when we practice meditation, when we go within and feel the deep harmony and the peace and the presence of God within us, everything begins to shift. And we come out, someone visited Ananda recently, Ananda Village in California, and they hadn't been there for 30 years. Someone who had been there in the early days, and now they were coming back. And she said to one of our friends, "I can't believe it. None of you have changed at all in 30 years. And of course, we don't see that. We see differences, but what the woman was perceiving was that the bodies were filled with light. The faces may change, the hair may grow gray, but the bodies were filled with light. And this is the fruit of filling the consciousness with the light of God. And we can do this every day. It's our choice. How can we do this? Well, I think the premier way, of course, is through the practice of meditation. If some of you are new here, come. We offer monthly classes in meditation and the path of Kriya Yoga. If you already know these things, come to our group meditations, but deepen that experience. I know sometimes we learn to meditate, we get Kriya Yoga initiation perhaps even, but then we might say, oh, my life is so busy. How do I have time to meditate? It's impossible. But meditation is the most, and I'm not saying this for any purpose other than I know it from my own experience. Meditation is the most important thing you can do every day. It changes everything in your life. It changes how you see things. It changes how you understand other people. It changes your ability to be creative and joyful, to deal with difficulties. Dalji was mentioning the fire. This was many years ago, 40 years ago, that burned down Ananda. But some of you know the story. Jyotish and I lost everything we had. And we had a child, just 10 days old. And the first response, I was on a different part of the property. It's a big piece of property, many hundreds of acres. And then finally I found Jyotish and I were able to reconnect. And he looked at me, and the house we lived in, it was one that he had built. And Jyotish has many skills and many talents. He's a wonderful artist, a wonderful spiritual leader. But I have to admit, he's not a great carpenter. The house we lived in was filled with leaks. And so the first thing Jyotish said to me after we saw each other, he said, you know what? We don't have to worry about leaks anymore. And you can't fake it in that moment. You can't fake it when you look at everything you've owned go up in flames. And, some people could run around and, God, why did this happen? Why did this happen? And we just calmly said, what's the next step? And the fruit of meditation is a life lived in the ability to face whatever comes with a sense of poise and harmony and the ability to say, Lord, if you brought this to me, it's for my own higher good, and I accept it joyfully. And Swami Kriyananda was just a wonderful example of this. I remember the day of the fire, a few days later actually, Swami came up to me and he just looked at me and he very calmly centered, he said, how are you, Devi? And I was going to start to say something, but he cut me off. And he said, well, that's good. And then he just walked over. But then a few weeks later, he wrote a note to us and he said, I'm sorry, of course, for all the loss that all of you had to deal with. But always remember, what God gives, we take. And not just with a sense of grudge, like, oh, okay, if this is what you're giving me, but with a sense of thank you, gratitude. And I've learned this in my life. Combining meditation with looking behind the events and details of our life and seeing God's hand in everything, even the most difficult things, to see God's hand there. And it brings a life where it becomes a world of wonder, of magic. And you can walk through that world in that way, and you carry an aura of peace and light within you. And I remember we were having some, we've learned so many things in watching the evolution of Ananda, political things and economic things, and just things I never thought I would learn in my life. But we had to go through all these public hearings to get approval to build this community, Ananda Village. And we were an unknown entity in the governmental district where we were. And so we went to the planning commission. You know, there were so many people we met. And they looked in their little rule book. We said, we're going to build a spiritual cooperative community. And they looked and they said, okay, you are a condominium. And then we said, no, you know, we're really not a condominium. And then they looked through their rule book and they said, okay, you're a subdivision. And we said, no, we're really not a subdivision. We're a cooperative community. So they didn't know what we were. So we had to go through all these different planning things. But I remember, and some of the people who lived in the area around us did not want a spiritual community in their area because they didn't know what that meant. And so there's one of these hearings, and one man got up very against Ananda, and he was saying, well, we can't trust these people, and you know, they don't have the same values that we do, which in fact was true. But, but finally, and he said, and this fellow Swami Kriyananda, I'm not sure about him, and we shouldn't trust him, and he was going on and on. And finally afterwards, Swami went up to him and he said, you know, I know you don't trust me and you don't like me, but I may be the devil incarnate, but that's not your problem. You should be happy. You don't have to have all these negative emotions all the time. Swami was perfectly calm. He had no animosity toward this man. But if we want to have peace within ourselves, the practice of meditation awakens that. Master Yoganandaji had one of his beautiful prayers was that I love to share. He said, resign yourself to the infinite peace within you. Resign yourself to the boundless love within you. So it isn't struggle to find it, fight your way through all the opposition. Simply settle back in your own, the center of your being. And there you will find that center of peace, that center of joy and love that is innately who we are. And the more we do that, the more we affect a change on the world around us, so that disharmony seems to go away. People seem to awaken. I remember once when Swami Kriyananda was in the hospital, he had arthritic hips, and so he had to have both hips replaced with artificial joints. And so he was in a wheelchair, and we were at the hospital with him, and one day he was wanting to get out of his room, so he said, why don't you just push me up and down the hallway so I can just see what's going on. So we got him in his wheelchair, and we were pushing him down the hallway, and he had just had very significant surgery, and you can think, well, he would want to kind of think of his own needs first, but not at all. First he said, because many people had sent him flowers, he said, I want you all to take the flowers and go and find a room where the patients are, where they don't have any flowers, and bring them into that room. So we did that in the hospital. And then we were wheeling down the hall, and at the end of the hallway there was an old man in a wheelchair, and I don't know what was really wrong with him, but he obviously had some senility or dementia, and he was kind of strapped into his wheelchair. He was sitting there at the end of the hallway all by himself, kind of slumped over, not really asleep, but not very conscious. And so we said, oh, let's go see that man. And so we wheeled him over. And just from his heart, Swami just said 2 words. He just said, good morning, with so much peace and so much love. And it was like the man woke up from a slumber of subconsciousness, and he just opened his eyes, And he began sitting up straight, and it's like he focused his eyes and he saw Swami, and there was Swami beaming peace and love at him. And he said, "Good morning." And it was like a miracle. It was like seeing someone awaken from a slumber of unawareness to coming back to the present moment. So the practice of meditation enables us, we may think in a little way, but when people come together with that power, it can begin to make a huge impact. And as I said, we have a moral and spiritual responsibility. The world is crying out. It's like a child. The planet itself, the oceans. I read somewhere that in 10 years there will be more plastic bags than fish in the ocean. The world is crying out for someone like a child, neglected and unloved. Will no one put out harmonious vibrations? Will no one think about the water and the trees and the air? Will no one think about the animosity between religions and cultural groups? And if we don't do that, as we've said, who will do it? And if we don't do it, we will have missed our own destiny. This is what we were born to do. And we can go on about our business and say, well, the world will take care of itself. But it doesn't take care of itself any more than a child will take care of itself. The world needs the energy of loving mother, father, brother, sister to say, come, you are sick now. Let me heal you. Let me heal you with thoughts of peace. Let me heal you with thoughts of harmony. Let me heal you with thoughts of service to others. And we need to find ways to do this. If your life is already structured, it doesn't even need to be outward. It can be inwardly, through prayer, through consciousness. When you hear of a troubled area in the world where there's been violence or terrorism, send your loving thoughts there. I read a story, true story, of there was a terrible chain car accident where many cars crashed into the other. And one person actually was had a near-death experience. They were temporarily left their body, and they could look down and see their body no longer alive and see all the wreckage and so forth. But all of a sudden, out of one of the cars in the back of the line, this person who was no longer encumbered by a body saw a beam of light coming out. And the soul of this person kind of moved over towards that beam of light. And what he perceived was it was a person in that car praying for all those who had been injured or killed. And in that beam of light, the soul re-entered his body. It wasn't yet time for him to go. But he saw the power of prayer in that moment. He saw it as a beam of light in the darkness of all the suffering of that huge pileup of cars. So essentially what I'm saying is, don't underestimate your own ability to make a difference in this world. Don't give up and say, what's the good of it? It's not, I'm just one little person, a tiny drop of water in the ocean. And in fact we are. We're less than a drop of water in the ocean. But our thoughts and our consciousness are very powerful. And we can and we need to, at this time, make a difference. Master Yoganandaji spoke very vehemently about coming world disasters, about difficulties, but he added, it needn't be if enough people would turn their minds to God. Well, I say this sincerely, we are Master's children. He has selected us to be those who turn their minds to God. That's our responsibility. With great earnestness now, It's the most important thing we can do to help the world, to help the planet. And so, through prayer and meditation, through watching our own actions and behavior, through the temptation to speak ill of others, to be critical of others. A friend of mine told me recently a wonderful technique that she does. She said, when I find myself starting to criticize other people, for example, saying, oh, that person's not reliable, they're never on time, I can't count on them. And then she said, I add the simple phrase, just like me. And she said, try it. It will totally diminish your desire to be critical of others, just like me. And there's so much wisdom in that little suggestion, because in that little suggestion, it's like saying, I am one with my brothers and sisters. Even if you see someone committing a terrible act of violence and murder to someone else, you know that within your heart that that person is in some way your brother and sister. A friend of mine was just telling me, he drove Jyotish and I to the airport. He's someone who lives at Ananda Village, and he's a Black American man. And he said at a certain point in his life, he would go to juvenile detention facilities where they had young men who had gotten in trouble and were in prison, but they weren't old enough to go to the adult facilities. And he said, I would teach, some of them didn't know how to read, even though they were 17, 18 years old. And he said, I went in there and I saw this one young man, and he was a skinhead, so his head was shaved, and he was a racist, he hated Black people. And I went up to him, our friend said, and he said, I'm going to teach you how to read. And at first the young boy didn't want to have anything to do with him, but they began working together, and he began going every day to help him after work. And little by little, this young man's life began to change, and he learned to read, and he got confidence, and he became friends with someone who he had hated before. And our friend, his name was Gopal, he knew all this. He knew that if I can reach this boy, I can save him. I can save him from a life of hatred and darkness and crime. And he came out of that juvenile detention hall, and his life took a total positive direction. And the beautiful end to that story was, at that time in the city of Sacramento, California, where this happened, they were selecting people. It was the time of the Olympics, to carry the Olympic torch. And this boy's mother, the mother of the skinhead boy, wrote such a letter praising our friend Gopal that he was selected to carry the Olympic torch through the city of Sacramento. Beautiful story, beautiful, the difference that acts of goodness can make. And that, just as Jyotish was saying, one person stops smoking and the ripple effect. One angry, disenfranchised young man who someone cares about, gives energy. Think of the ripple effect. It makes a huge difference. I invite you now to join with me to be channels of peace and harmony. And I would like to lead you in a prayer. This is a prayer of Yogananda's that is a prayer for creating harmony in the world. It's quite simple, really, but we've been doing this now for about a month throughout Ananda Village, all of the Ananda communities in America, and all our meditation groups, repeating it in every group meditation, every individual meditation, just keeping this like a beautiful mantra, going on and on and on. And so I'd like to teach it to you tonight, and I would like to invite you in your own life, in your own puja room, your own meditation area, before you go to work, when you're stuck in traffic, whatever it might be, to do this prayer. So this is the way we do it. You start off by Let's close our eyes. Let's sit up nice and straight. Be calm. Concentrate at the spiritual eye. Kutasta Chaitanya. Relax your body. And then visualize the world, our planet, the beautiful blue marble floating in space. And see the atmosphere in the air, pure and clean. The oceans and plants filled with God's light and beauty. The soil rich and fertile. All men and women, animals and plants who share this small habitat in an infinite universe. See it all filled with light, with God's harmony and peace. And now we're going to say these words. I'll say them once first, and then we'll do them together. Very simple. We simply say, Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. We'll do this 10 times, and then we stop, and we see ourselves surrounded in God's light, and we repeat 3 times, Lord, fill me with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. So let's begin now in unison. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Now pause, feeling yourself surrounded with these divine qualities. Let's repeat in unison. Lord, fill me with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill me with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill me with peace and harmony, peace and harmony. Lord, fill me with peace and harmony. Now, I invite you to rub your hands together to feel the flow of energy, and let's raise our hands and chanting Om 3 times. Send out